Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining me. This is the second video in our series on columns, and in this video I'd like to show you how to lay out some grids. So let's go ahead and get started. If you go to your Structure tab on your ribbon, go all the way over to the Datum section where you have the choice between levels and grids. Levels aren't appropriate here, so it's grayed out, but grids are, and grids are like levels on floor plans in a way. They define, they're like infinite planes that go in the background where we're going to be able to park our grids on. So the intersection of these grids that we're going to be drawing out is going to be a place we're going to be able to land our columns on. And because our columns are going to be associated with those grid intersections, we're going to be able to manipulate those columns and keep those in line simply by changing some of the parameters of our grids. So enough said, let's go ahead and draw some grids out. So what we want is a couple grids that are going to be associated with these exterior walls. We're going to try not to make connections here, because we're going to go ahead and make modifications to that. And so we'll draw maybe our 1, 2, 3 grids on the top. We'll label those as such. And let's go ahead and put some grids in on this side. So you notice that I'm drawing from the inside to the outside so that our target can be on the outside. Now for this one I'm going to stop. Instead of calling that grid number 4, I'm going to make that grid number A, capitalized, because this may be an annotation and may end up on a drawing. And then we'll continue, we'll continue drawing those out. So go back to Structure, go to Grid, and we'll put a couple more in here. That should be B, and this one's going to be C. That's a little bit closer elevation symbol, so let's go ahead and move that back a little bit, just kind of get it out of the way. Okay, let's establish some relationships with our grids. This grid, you shouldn't have any associations to it with it right now. But let's go ahead and do this. Let's go to our Align tool in our Modify tab, and let's align that to the outside of our building. So I'm going to try to click. In fact, let's use the midpoint of the building for that, a midpoint of this wall. So I'm going to click on that as a reference, our static reference, and our movable reference for that. And let's go ahead and lock that into place. Let's do the same thing with this wall here. So I'm going to take this grid, I'm going to move that out. Other choices rather than the midpoint of the wall would be like maybe the core face exterior of the wall for that grid line. So let's go ahead and choose the midpoint of this wall and put that together and lock that into place. And then for this grid, what we're going to be doing is just clicking on that grid, and it's going to give us a dimension, and we're going to make that a permanent dimension right here. Take this dimension line like we've done before, take the middle grip on that line and go ahead and move it to our grid. Now we'll take this 16-foot dimension, move it out here a little bit so it's a little bit out of the way. And if we click on our grid just like we could manipulate other objects here, let's make that 12 feet instead of 16 feet. We'll bring that in a little bit. If we want to, let's go ahead and lock that into place, but we could, right now, if we knew that it was going to be 12 feet, but to demonstrate that the columns can move with the grids, we're not going to do that right now. So with our A grid, we're going to do the same thing that we've done before. Go to our Align tool, we're going to pick the midpoint of that wall. Okay, save the project. And Sarah, yes, I am borrowing your model here, if you don't mind. Let's pick the midpoint of this wall. So clicking the midpoint, I used a tab key to find that. I wasn't able to find it at the distance I was out, but as soon as I moved in, I was able to find the midpoint of that wall. And then we're going to go ahead and clicking out, we're going to lock that into place. So these two other ones, just to be consistent with this 12-foot dimension, let's go ahead and put a 12-foot dimension on these two. So let's make that a permanent dimension. Click in this dimension line and move that to the outside. Take this dimension line by moving on or clicking on that grid or that grip. We'll click on that, and then we'll take that dimension and move it off to the side. Clicking that grid line. Now that this dimension is editable, we're going to change that to 12 and leave that as it is. And the same thing with C here too. We're going to get the dimensions that we have on this thing. Make that a permanent dimension over here. We're going to take the 16-foot dimension, move that onto that grid line, and take this grid line with that grip, or that dimension line on that grip, and we're going to move that to that grid line. And when we click in this grid line, we can change the value of that dimension, make that from 10 to 12 feet. Okay, looks good. Let's take that dimension and move it to the outside with the other one. So now we have a kind of a grid spacing of 12 feet by 12 feet from the walls and from each grid line, and now we're ready to place our columns, and we will do that in our next film.